On this week's episode of Healers of the World, we are jumping into the realm of elemental healing and allyship, a world where we peer behind the veil of reality as we know it and quest for sacred relationship with the elemental divas and the spirits of the plants, trees, minerals, and all things that grow. When I select my guests to join me on the show, I'm looking for those individuals whose hearts are so obviously alight with a pure quest for gnosis that they leave no doubt as to the mastery of their crafts. Individuals who have been welcomed into the world of magic through ancestry or soul purpose, and who are humbly going about their days, bringing authentic beauty and healing to our world. And today's guest is absolutely no exception. Hailing from the United Kingdom, Paul Martin-Strode has developed a deeply intuitive connection with nature through personal endeavours and healing work over the past 25 years. Paul's belief is that since we originate from nature and are a part of it, it makes sense to rekindle our connection to nature, as surely it is at the heart of our healing. And so Paul's approach to healing is collaborative, with the spirit of nature always present. Amen, Paul. I totally agree with you there, brother. So Paul uses a blend of craniosacral therapy and his own British wildflower essences, which he established in 1999, as well as astral structures to facilitate his remote shamanic healing with his clients. He specializes in working with newborn babies, children and animals, particularly horses, and he is also trained in Dolphin-assisted bioaquatics for paediatrics with disabilities. In addition to his healing work, Paul offers workshops and courses to enable clients to operate their own shamanic astral structures, most notable being the spiral bridge, as he calls it, which is an astral structure that he has developed co-creatively with nature as a tool to create a virtual safe space to communicate with nature and to receive healing from it. And this is actually how my path crossed with Paul, as I recently attended one of these workshops. And I have been like a child in a fairy garden playing with my own spiral bridge ever since.
Yeah,
So
great.
welcome, Paul. I'm truly delighted to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me. And what a drum roll. Up to this point, I was like, oh, that's me. That's me. She's talking about me, all these things. So thank you so much for having me here and to talk about all the lovely things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I feel like we're entering our own playground today, and let's see. I'm sure that there are elemental eyes and ears very curious to where this conversation is going to go today. So truly appreciate you being here. And I'd love to start by asking you, Paul, how this journey in shamanic elemental healing started for you. Were you always intuitive as a child? Where did your journey of awakening and becoming start? And when did you start seeing and hearing beyond the veil?
I don't know how it is for you or for any of the listeners that are listening, but I'm not sure where the journey started. It's almost like, was I on the journey? You look back and you can see that you were on a journey, but where it started, I'm not sure. There are certain places definitely that I can indicate and share that, are sort of benchmarks. But have I always been intuitive? When you're younger, I suspect so, yes. But when you're younger, you don't know that you are. And certainly your mum and dad aren't telling you. Like mum and dad didn't even know that was happening. And so I think that the behavioural issues, yes, being dyslexic, yes, being the youngest of 5 boys, but you can get through that stuff. But the behavioural issues that came through, the frustration of not being I think this is me looking back along my path. At the time, I didn't know it, but that anger or frustration of not being able to express it or recognized or understood or misunderstood, I think that was the biggest thing. You're putting words in my head, you're seeing things that aren't there, you're making things up. When you know that you're not, that frustration and anger was getting pushed out and then misrepresented, because I was raised as a Catholic, misrepresented as the dark side of things. So I think, for me to say, was I intuitive as a child? Highly likely, but you couldn't say it as that, right? I think the first time I realized something was going on was when I was at school. I must have been about 15 years old, 14 years old, and we were sitting in this circle, and some of the girls were doing this mind reading trick, mind reading thing, and they were saying, right, I'll think of something, and then the other girls would try and figure out what that was, and then they all left, and the one person left, I said, oh, give me a go of that, let me see if I can do that. And she's like, so I started doing it, and I started nailing the things that she said, and then she looked really freaked out. And I said, why are you looking freaked out? I thought, I'm getting what she said. That's the point. You're getting what I'm seeing in my mind, because before it was a joke. And I said, how was it a joke before? We were pointing our feet to the thing that we were looking at, so the girls would know. So from there, myself and this girl and I, she was a prefect. I was in the younger classes, so she would take me in prep time, and then we'd start experimenting with symbols and geometric shapes on the chalkboard, and then she would think of them, and then I would try and tune into them. And then we had dreams together. I'd finish a dream, she'd start a dream, and so there was something going on, which I realized as a teen. Then I buried all that, because I thought, from my Catholic upbringing, that's the devil's work, right? That's all, all kind of shamanic, pagan, all this stuff was the devil's work. I know that kind of sounds a bit extreme, but that's the Catholic upbringing, right? And then it wasn't until probably my mid-20s, early 20s, my girlfriend at the time's mum had a book called Open to Channel by Sanya Roman, and I started reading that, and that started working with guides, and channeling with guides, very much the crystals. Actually, those two guides I met then are still very much within the team when I do remote healing. But to be honest, Robyn, it's all, and even making the essences, you've got no one to validate them with. Yes, you've got your clients, and yes, you can prove them. But there's a healthy skeptic and a healthy cynic that sits on my shoulders that keeps me grounded. And they've always whispered in my ear that well, how do you know you're just not making this up? How do you know it's real? And it wasn't until I did the remote healing work 5 years ago that everything then came together, because we could start to see things that people weren't telling us, that things were getting treated and healed without people telling us, without us knowing what's going on. So there was something, as I've gone along my journey, that veil is lifted, and I've become just more and more confident with it. I've been doing it for over 25 years. So you would hope by, after 25 years, you're more confident. But I think there's something all right to be a bit cynical and to be a bit skeptical, because it keeps you grounded. Yeah, they're the two aspects. Yeah, so that's the journey. What was the other question that you asked me in that?
Well, I asked you too when you started seeing and hearing behind the veil, but I feel like you've answered that, Paul. And while I was listening to you, what was coming up for me is, when you consider the soul's journey, that we've come to this place with complete amnesia. And, the soul mission of every single human being on the planet is remember who you are, remember where you've come from, remember the divinity of your origin. And so there's something around having to go into the dark and not have conclusive evidence, this amnesia that we work with on Earth, that seems to be so important in uncovering personal power, uncovering personal magic. And so listening to you talk, I just feel like it seems to be such an important part of the story of becoming, which is learning to trust that subtle voice, that, there's something about our initiation into trusting the subtle that seems to be the gatekeeper to opening up these veils, because, that aspect of the story seems to be synonymous across so many traditions. I mean, it certainly matches my own experience, that we're here to learn how to see and walk in the dark. And one of the things about this playground on earth is that we're going to be constantly manipulated and tripped up by the external energies. I often say to my clients, our sight is one of our most misleading senses. We can be so easily manipulated by sight, where there's something around an inner voice and an inner knowing, an inner sentience that keeps us powerful if we choose to tap into it. So, that's just what stands out for me when I hear your journey, that I don't know if anyone just completely falls down Alice's rabbit hole and everything makes sense
Mm.
and we have that full confidence. I don't think it's meant to be like that, and probably for good reason.
Mm. I agree, and also embracing the dark, embracing the shadow, in this remembering aspect. Yeah, right on. And not just remembering ourselves, but our ancestors and where we've come from. But the Druid work that I follow, the Druid path. The shaman sees in the dark. We are born
Yeah.
out of the dark. The darkness has been my greatest teacher. And
Mm,
through the Druid work, they never judged the day by a day's travel. It would be always about a night's travel. It was always the night
mm,
that took the reference. And so
mm,
going into the shadow, going into the dark, to realize that you need to face those demons yourself. For me, it was from Catholicism. It was the devil himself. Then you realize that,
mm,
particularly more my deeper dive into nature, there's none of that in nature. There's no
mm,
twisted, dark aspect that we present as the devil in nature. Nature does not produce such a thing. It just cannot create such a vibration on the
mm,
web. As Jesus says, if there's any evil doing, it comes from our own hearts, right? So I
mm,
think that
mm,
maybe that's what Jesus went into the desert for and wrestled with the devil. Maybe it wasn't the devil. Maybe it was his ego. These
mm.
aspects that we really need to work on. And I hear you about the things that our eyes deceive us and the things that are around us that can trip us up. But I'm very keen to hold this cornerstone of, is it those things that are tripping us up, or are we allowing ourselves to be tripped up? And for me, that's a big conscious shift in stopping blaming things like the devil. The devil's making me. Oh, my past is
Mm,
making me. You're making me. You're making me angry. No. Okay,
mm,
some of the things that you might have said, I'm allowing myself, and I think that's regaining the power, the strength, and the
mm,
remembering that actually we're not victims by these scenarios. It's how we choose to navigate them, and with healing. And this is very much the plant allies have taught me. This is very much to own that scenario, to
mm,
never deny myself from the opportunity of learning. And
mm,
so that's the sort of plant spirit medicine aspect. But no, I hear you.
mm,
I hear you. And taking that responsibility and that remembrance, and particularly of
mm,
our ancestors, particularly of our
mm,
ancestors. I don't know how it is in South Africa, but very much here up in the north, in the sort of in our ways of doing it, somebody dies and you bury them, and you tend to, that's it kind of thing. I mean, that's a very sweeping comment, but actually through my remote healing work, I've discovered how 3 kids I worked with, all under the age of 9, had night terrors. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know about night terrors, but all 3 of them had now, this isn't for everybody, right? But this is just through my work. All 3 of them had a disconnect between their fathers. They didn't know their father,
mm,
or the mum took them away from their father. And it was the paternal line's ancestry who came from their ancestors way back to help heal the kid in the now. And now the kids don't get night terrors. So I agree. It's the remembering is really important of where we're from.
You know, the first thing that comes up for me, and it mirrors my experience. It's just something I'm really devoted to, which is this aspect of humility and how humility opens the gates of magic. In my grandest initiations, those that I've walked very humbly into the initiation, I've received the initiation, and those where I haven't come in with humility, I've had to go back and do the work to be reinitiated into whatever it is that I was doing. And there's something very humble about needing to see in the dark and not having crisp, clear answers or this, outright confirmation of our gifts and of magic that corresponds to and supports the path of coming home, which is around that inner guidance, the inner knowing, the inner sentience. And, so I really wanted to just say that in agreement with everything that you were sharing about the dark, because it's something I'm so passionate about. I work a lot with the feminine, and there's so much around these teachings of the feminine, which is reclaiming that power from learning to trust oneself, learning to awaken the voice within. And I don't think that we can do magic without it. I don't think that we can work with the subtle realms without it, because if we're not questioning ourselves, if it is too easy, there's a certain precedence to the ego that just seems to happen with humans, which really aligns with what you were saying. And then the ancestors, Paul. I mean, I'm so delighted that you brought that up, because my own work out on the land, it just keeps bringing me back to ancestral work. I mean, I have altars out now on the land that I used to just do altars for the land, but so much of my time and energy is now being taken up with ancestral work, and particularly with repair and understanding that there is a certain level of trance, generational fear that I carry within my body. There is a certain level of transgenerational repair that still needs to be done with the land to come into right relations. And as much as I am seeking healing and I'm seeking reaching the full potential of carrying my medicine, or I'm seeking to be in the most sacred relationship I can with the land, I don't know if it's possible without that ancestral work, because I am the sum total of my lineage. It's not just me that's standing in front of the tree or standing at the land saying, open up your secrets to me so that I can do good work with you. Because there is all this energy that I carry from those who've come before me.
I know, and it's a curious frontier, this very subject, where I, before remote viewing, very much attributed to the soul and soul progression, and I liked the idea of karma, and it gave me understanding and meaning and what it was to be here and to develop my soul, so therefore I would go on to another place that's almost greater than what we have already, right? This sort of nirvana, this aspect, this progression of the soul, of which you progress so much that then you don't come back, right? So I worked with that until remote viewing. And then I started to see the ancestral stuff. And then I started to read Dr. Bruce Lipton's work about epigenetics and the cells. And I started to get curious that these aspects that we have heralded for hundreds, thousands of years, us humans have created this way of thinking and spirituality that may be so disconnected from nature itself that is actually denying us the opportunity of working with the ancestors and our roots, because of these constructs that elevate humans to this level, this, for goodness sake, we've made gods in our image, right? And it alludes to the even the ascension stuff that maybe we will talk about later. But this sort of human centric aspect of spirituality that is so much about projecting off this beautiful Eden, this planet that we're on, into other places, almost forgetting about it, using planet Earth as this launching pad for us to disconnect from this space, when actually it is a landing pad. Earth is a landing pad. And if we can look at epigenetics, which is scientific's interpretation for past lives, that those memories that for the people who might not be who understand epigenetics seems to be a higher form of DNA expression. It's not, the blueprint isn't in the DNA. The blueprint is somewhere else in the energy field. There is, and so for an example of epigenetics, I met this young guy many moons ago. He was about 9. He never knew his dad, for complicated reasons, but the grandparents were raising him. The grandparents didn't even tell their son that they were raising him, right? So there was no communication between them. But okay, so he looked like his dad, but he walked like his dad. He's never met him. He spoke and had attitude like his dad, but he never met him. So you get these other character traits, not just blue eyes, not just blonde hair, but these other traits that come from our ancestry. So I have a client who is keeps on seeing birds, dead birds. Then she has these waves that come through. Then she has this big surge of grief and anger, and she felt it was hers. And when we went into it, it was from her Jewish ancestry and the gas chambers and the frustration and the pain that was coming up. And initially, she didn't want to go there. And we did, and we healed it in accordance with her highest. And now she doesn't have that experience. Now she doesn't have those black birds, these dead birds that she sees all the time. So I think this remembering is so important. And the flowers particularly, the allies, the nature intelligence, it's almost like, would you not come home, you humans? You're even building rockets to get the hell out of here. But would you not come home and remember the ancestors and honor the ancestors and be with the ancestors? Because surely we need that right now, to be earthbound, grounded, feet on the ground, as opposed to intergalactically boosting ourselves around the universe and trying to deal with light and dark forces, which actually may be taking us away from the work we need to do, which is to descend, not ascend, to descend, to be the human on the planet connected to the earth, the web that we are surely all from. And just to finish that little loop, when my mum died nearly a year ago, I started asking about, heaven and purgatory. It's the Catholic thing. And where does my mum go? Where do people go? It's a very nice thought to think that she's in heaven. It makes it easier for me. But I started to wonder, where do all the trees and the bees and the birds go where they die? Because surely that's where we all go when we die. So I think it's really, really important. I think we both realize that this connection with the ancestors is uber important, and more now for anything. The planet needs us to remember our ancestry. It really, really does. It doesn't need us to go intergalactically shooting off all over the place. Sorry, that's my own judgment. It needs us to come home and hug a tree and to talk to the trees and talk to the plants and connect with the seasons, light a fire and connect to the elements, as we've always done. That's balancing and healing our psyche. So that's my penny's worth.
This talk of ancestors and this talk of, deep embodiment, it brings up the medicine wheel, and I'll explain to you what I mean, because I feel that ascension actually looks like descending so deeply into being where we are that the veils drop, right? For me, that's what ascension is, to be here where we are once again surrounded in a reality where magic is so tangible to the average person. That's from the descension into the being. And when we look at nature, when we look at this massive web that we are made of, we are part of, it's the beginning, it's the end as we know it. And we look at her cycles, there cannot be life without death. And, every morning when I stand on my medicine wheel and I face the west and I make my prayer to the west, my prayer is, may my death be strong. May my death be so strong that my life can be so rich. Can my ability to shed be gracious and courageous? And, when I face the east, it's all about bringing in the new. But the east, the powers of the east, the guardians and the protectors, the gatekeepers that sit in the east can't do their work. We can't have that that newness, that new life, if there isn't the death happening in the West. And where I'm going with all of this, with our ancestors, is the deep sadness at how little space death has in our culture. Like there's so little culture and there's so little ritual in our modern day age around death. And when we don't tend to death, the whole cycle gets ill, right? It's like the human body. If the human body isn't eliminating well, it doesn't matter what amazing supplements and foods you put into it. And if you look at the whole system of being, it's the same with our relationship with death. And I think we're saying the same thing, this consciousness of constantly looking at the greener grass, let's go out into the planet, let's ascend out of this reality, and let's just forget about the ancestors. Let's just forget about our origin. It creates illness because it creates stagnation.
Yeah, that dis-ease, dis-ease, we're not at ease. And look, again, the remote work has shown me, what's real, what's reality, and, your one's reality in angels is real for them. But it is a reality that is a projection of the individual, so what have we got to really hold on to? The trees and the plants and the rocks, it's real. This beautiful plant that's sitting by the computer here, it's still here when I'm gone. It's real. These it's almost like I'm a human myself, but it's almost like us humans have got so far up ourselves, like I say, made images of gods in our images, that it is really, really important to remember the descension. And I'm so relieved to hear you say it in that way, because when we were looking at questions and things and talking about the ascension, doorways are multiple and can lead us into all manner of reality that aren't potentially real. And they are the projection of the individual, which makes it real. But the oak that stands is real. You can hold it, you can touch it. The plants, the earth is real. So, yeah, this descension, the Druids talk about the descension, getting into the body, where it's a sensuous spiritual practice, and to use your senses to experience the world in this way. And since I've descended into Druidry, I've become a lot less heavy on myself about getting everything right and having to be so pure and angelic and pristine and clean, as it were, with all these things, where to enjoy the life, to connect with the seasons and earth and flowers and our ancestors. For me, it's really attractive. And it's really real. It's what's real. You can touch it. It's not subjective, it's objective, because it's there, right?
Yeah, amen to that. Because, okay, my experience has been, and, this surely would be mirrored in so many texts, shamanic texts. I mean, this is the framework of shamanism, is it not? That it's with the dissension, it's with the coming into deep presence and deep sacred relationship with ourselves, our bodies, our environment, that the world of nature starts to open herself up to us. The magic starts to reveal itself. The animism that's there in the rivers and the mountains, trees, starts to reveal itself to those who are deeply grounded into their bodies, into the earth, and into reality. And this, something I'm so curious about, and I still don't feel like I've put all the puzzle pieces together, is understanding why the elemental world is the way it is. Because when I look at the animals, for instance, around us, personally, I think that the animals are here to uphold a level of consciousness on the planet. Like, I feel like the animals are the real light workers because it's such pure energy. The level of consciousness that animals carry is just beyond the level of service that animals appear to be in and on the planet seems to be profound to me. And the same goes with all of the the trees and the plants. And so I have this question: what is the story with humans, and what is the relationship between humans and the elemental world? Now, given your work, and just to recap for our listeners, Paul has created beautiful wildflower essences using the wildflowers and crystals. And the astral structures that he creates and he teaches are to support communication with the natural world. And so this is why I want to ask Paul this question. Have you had experience with elemental, fae, or elven beings?
Yeah, so have I connected with the nature beings? Yeah, the Fae and the She, the abattoir in South Africa, and so look, traditionally we call them the fairies, don't we? Michelle Smallwright says there's nothing cute about a fairy. And I like that. Initially it was like, oh, hang on. But we've got these images of fairies as like Tinkerbell, and the Victorians have done a very good job of painting that kind of aspect. And that seems to be the generic representation of fairies. And then through the Middle Ages, they did a really good job of twisting all of the aspects that we understand about the Fae and the She and the fairy realms into these kind of tricksters. They'll steal your babies. They'll trip you up. They don't trust them. When they used to be called the good neighbours. I mean, particularly in the British Isles, which is deep within fairy tradition, right? There's so much documented about it. But yeah, they used to call them the good neighbours, the peaceful ones. They used to call them the gentry. And so this relationship has got weird and twisted, even to the point, like I was saying with Catholicism, the word pagan and shamanism was the devil's work. And so when I ended up co-producing flower essences and hearing voices in my heads from the flowers, I really thought I was dancing with the devil. And with the intuitive stuff, I actually went to go see the priest when I was probably about 17 to talk to him about this. But that's a whole other story. So, yes, and there seems to be different layers, yeah, of intelligence, say, within the nature intelligence. And we're within that. We're not higher, and maybe the different layers isn't the right way. Different places on the web. We're all on that web. We're all on that same web. And so for me, I tend not to use the word fairy anymore because of the negative implication of it. But I use the fae, which is the traditional name that we use here in the British Isles. And it feels like I'm honouring them. And for me, I see them as green orbs, green beings, and they seem to be related more to flowers and plants. But then through the spiral bridge, the astral structure that we taught, that I teach, that is very much the she, or the Siddhi, as they say in Wales, the she, they say in Scotland, where I live. And for me, they come through as blue orbs, and they are magicians. They're the spiral keepers, the magic of nature. And when I came to South Africa and met you guys and we did the workshop, I started researching the South African nature spirits. And yes, of course, you've got them there. They're different aspects on the web where they're sitting to present themselves in a different way than what we have here. Actually, when I met the abattoir, which is particularly concentrated in South Africa, when they met the she, they were very scared of the she in my healing space, in my spiral bridge, because they saw these tattooed aspects over them and these big painted spirals. And that type of intelligence was something that they weren't used to. So it really made me understand the she better and my pre-Christian spiritual heritage from these lands. So yes, those aspects there. We're working with them and meeting with them.
I would love to just hear any musings you have on how you perceive the role of the relationship between these beings and human beings. Because, the connection of these beings to nature and the natural world is obvious, and so I think we would all understand that their role with nature is one of a caretaking custodial species. One of my previous guests, we had a very interesting conversation around how the role of human beings, during these times is actually to remember that we too, like the Fae or the Elven, the elemental beings, is to be a custodial species. But I'm very curious as to whether you have any musings on the relationships, and what I mean by that is there are stories of how we used to coexist with these beings before the veils were dropped. And there are many stories about how the veils have actually lifted now. These beings are now accessible. There's just not many of us that are in enough congruency to communicate with these beings. So, have they ever shared anything with you? Have your experiences informed you of anything of our history or relationship with these beings across the veil?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. So there is, in preparation for this talk, I did push myself to the edge of the veil, to the veil itself. And there's a very good reason why the veil is there. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but it's clearly to veil something, right? Though
Yes.
up here in Bonnie, Scotland, there's an old Celtic saying called "it's thin" up here, meaning the veil is thin. So there's this aspect of the veil. So there are certain things that I just can't get my antennae beyond the veil to answer certain questions. On the sort of on that makeup, it's almost like when I get there, I get this veil. I can see it in my inner eye, but it's blank. My antennae just don't go beyond certain questions. Almost almost the kickback that I get is that you just don't have the capacity, almost the imagination, the whatever's in the data, to be able to represent those questions. So how I can answer that from my earthly experience is that nature's so how far that went back, we have to look at, folklore and mythology and stuff like that. But we very much intertwined, if we roll with that, and to what extent, much more than we are now. So where does that play now with our relationship? I think, I don't know if it's their role, but it's certainly a goal, if I can say that for them, to get us back online. Greed and power, if there's any evil, it's those two things, greed and power. And I think us humans are gluttons for that stuff, and are disconnecting whenever that started from Mother Nature itself. I suspect the Abrahamic religions, have got a huge part to play with the disconnection and the misrepresentation and the presenting of the feminine in the way they do is all part of this disconnection that nature is trying to weave us back together. That's what I try to. I hope what happens with the Spiral Bridge is that every time you open that up through the co-creative agreement with nature, that we're weaving these threads of connection back to nature itself. So if there's any role, it's to try and help us humans realize we sit on the web too, and that when we die, we go to where the birds and the bees and the trees go. Surely we are not above nature, surely. Abrahamic religions have said that Earth was created for us, surely. What's all that about? We've become so up ourselves as humans that I think the goal, I don't think it was a role. I think it's a goal because we've got so distracted. We've got so distracted to the point we're making rockets to try and get off this planet because basically we think it's going to all fall apart and die, and it's the only way we can survive as a species. So for me, my experience in seeing the way the plant spirit medicine works and working with our allies is the remembering and the healing, and not just taking a pill to eradicate something, but really sit with it. So plants, for me, have really been guides, teachers and healers. They've guided me through the intuitive process to the appropriate remedies I need and my clients do, through biofeedback tools, through this whatever intelligence that we're able to access. And then from that guidance, then it teaches us that that flower isn't just good for my headache. That flower is teaching me that the aspects that create that headache. So now they're teaching me, then you take the remedy and they help heal. But they don't deny us from the opportunity of learning. And I think that's one of the biggest, apart from friendship, that I've learned with nature is to own our stuff. That cornerstone that, Robyn, you can't make me feel anything, full stop. But what happens if you say something really horrible or nasty? It is still me who decides whether I choose to react to that. Then some smart Alice always says, what happens if I slap you around the face? Well, then I've caused you pain. Sure, but it's my body that has still reacted to the pain. So I think what plants have really done and what their role is or goal is to get us to tidy up and own our stuff, and just to heal and own up and lighten up and enjoy the life and be grateful for the life. People say, well, look, this is my own opinion. What is the meaning of life? Since remote healing, where I've arrested everything that I've believed in human context about soul progression and everything like that, which may well be, and clearly some of your listeners will hold that. So I don't mean to offend. It's just my own process, is that the goal of life is to enjoy it. Of course, not do any damage or not hurt anyone, but to enjoy the life. Enjoy the life. So plants have really helped me with that. And I see if that's our relationship with them or them with us, to remind us that, hey, brother, sister, we too exist. And hey, brother and sister, that's what we are. We're brothers and sisters, all on the same web. And we can't do it soon enough, it would seem.
So the statement around the meaning of life being joy, I feel is a really rich statement, because truly joy comes from healing. It comes from sovereignty. It comes from being in balance. We don't have authentic joy if we're out of balance. We don't have authentic joy if we are not empowered. So I feel that there's a lot behind that statement. And there's so much that I want to ask you about what you've just shared, Paul, but can you talk to me more, or talk to us more about how your view on soul progression changed? What were the fundamental factors that changed your view on soul progression from your remote, and specifically why from the remote healing?
Yes, okay. Big question. Look, and again, I'm not saying I'm right. This is from my opinion. What's real? In short, what is reality? What is reality? What is real? And my mum's passing really shook the tree about this, right? So the traditional thought is that we are souls, that we are the I, and that I travels through all these different lifestyles and terrains and experiences, so I can get to Nirvana, whatever that is, at the end of the goal. So that's sort of these traditional things. First, there is no I, it's we. Right. So the first, if I can say, impediment to that structure that I've dedicated my life to for so long is that we've forgotten the we. Look, we've even got the iPhone, the iPad, what do I want to do? We've forgotten the we, and the we is the web. The we is what we are together. So that was the first cracks. The second is, in this quantum space, that when I do the remote work, what is going on? What is that? We're able to see things, we're able to do things. But when it came to the traditional aspect of the soul, it can be packaged up with the light and dark and the good and evil, and this battle of light and dark and duality. And so when I started doing my healing work, And the big reason why I didn't do remote healing work in the beginning is because it sounded too freaky, and some people are having some horrendous kind of light and dark scenarios. And from my background, I didn't want to go anywhere near that. Lockdown pushed me into into remote work. So I started to see what people traditionally see as dark, evil, sucky things, maybe aquatic, maybe other things sucking, leeching onto people's energy field. It's the dark side of things. So that was my reality at that time. And so then, and we would remove them, and sometimes it would be a real, tussle with getting these things. My client would feel better, but then they come back and the same thing is there. So I started to eyeball those dark things and it was snarling and it was I was like, crikey, lucky I'm in the Spa Bridge where I feel the healing space that I use, because I feel contained and safe in that place. But then as I got closer to it, I realized that nasty, snarling, evil, energy sucking thing was actually pain body. It was the client's own pain body. Suddenly it all changed. Suddenly it all changes. Then we heal the thing as opposed to banish the thing. And now the clients don't come back because it's healed. So it showed me that how we see things is really important. So what is real? What is reality? That we use this aspect of the soul, and because it's very convenient, because it can, as I plunged into this, what is real and what's not, potentially that this concept, this rhetoric about the soul is a really good way of controlling us. It fits into a spiritual lineage and evolvement. It's wrapped up with other bits and pieces. Different religions have different aspects to it. Karma being a big influence on the soul progression or not, or conditioning it to other things. And it just seems so human-centric. It seems so human-centric. And on the back of what we've spoken about the remembering and the druidry work and the working with the druids and that aspect of nature-based spiritual practice, and connecting and remembering to our ancestors, and then seeing epigenetics, that maybe it's not that I was that warrior in China who was a great blah, blah, blah. Maybe it wasn't my soul in that reincarnation session. It may be epigenetics. So what's real? What's real? So I've just started to unplug all of these plugins, these realities, these thoughts that I've thought were real, and they're kind of a foundation, aren't they? We all talk about the soul and the soul progression in the eye. Well, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I'm going to challenge that now, because the remote healing work is showing me that the space between me and you is filled with magic. And the space between me and you and all of the people listening to this, the space between them and us and you, there's a magic in that space that we can, I don't want to use the word manipulate. I don't want to manifest. We're manifestors. So we are magicians in our own world, and we have such important parts to play in this planet on an individual level, but collectively. And I think that, and this is going to be kind of outrageous to say, I think that everything that's gone before us or from behind us up to this point may be, and this is just my reality, a way to control the human and deny them from connecting to the magic of earth and our relationship with the mother, and this incessant thing against the feminine and this matriarchal aspects. Look, there's some, look at the green man. We got to embrace this nurturing, loving aspect of the male aspect. It's not all toxic masculinity out there, though I appreciate what people might say about it. So I'm proposing that anything that takes us away from nature, if there's anything dark, it's that. But I'm a nature lover, of course I'm going to say that stuff. So the remote healing work has questioned what is real. I don't know what real is. The oak tree that I stand by, this plant, is still here when I go. Some people will say in quantum, well, in quantum, maybe it's not. And then you go down this rabbit hole, and then you've lost your anchor. You've got to hold on to some sort of reality. Otherwise, you've got no grounding. You've got no anchor. So for me, quite fittingly, I'm very happy to go back into time, back into earth, down into earth, descend into earth. And whatever happens after my death, well, it's happening to everyone. And whether I go to the pearly white gates or not, highly likely not, that I return back to the big ocean of creation, and that I enter back into the big cosmic. I mean, they're the veils, aren't they? They're the things that we can't see beyond. I have tried to ask the origins of the elementals, and I have tried to ask whether they were there before us and what their story is. And time again, I get to that veil, and they're like, there's a very good reason for that veil. Because if you knew it all, you wouldn't be doing all this work right now. So that's a rather long-winded answer to how I realized that through the remote healing work, that these aspects that I spiritually have devoted myself to may not exist.
Yeah, for sure. And, Paul, I love that this is something that you came about through experience. You walked in blindly to this new reality. You weren't looking for it. You experienced something, which then informed, you to start questioning rather than reading a book written by someone else. And my clients know, I talk about this all the time, we have to be so careful with the mind, because the mind gets so easily manipulated. But there's something around that inner sentience, learning how to judge what feels right and what doesn't feel right, which I would understand as the inner feminine. But, that's neither here nor there with this conversation. As being such an important tool to retain sovereignty in a world where we don't know what's up and what's down, right? Because there is so much manipulation. And if we have anything that we should be using, like the most important tool to navigate this reality, is that inner sentience. And while I was listening to you talk, and I don't know how this is going to come out my mouth, things don't always come out the way that I see them in my head, but let's go, is that if I was a warrior, from off planet, and I decided to come down into this really dense, slow reality to experience it, to evolve, to be of service, one of the three seems to be, the main reason why we could be here. Surely I would look for the most obvious intelligence, which is the natural world, and base my constructs of reality on that. I live on the land, and when I say I live on the land, I live on a farm, and we have wild animals. We've got buck on our farm. And if the buck don't produce much offspring in the spring, we know that there's going to be drought the following winter, right? And if they do produce a lot of offspring in the spring, then we know that there's going to be rain throughout the year. So they know that there's going to be enough grass to feed their young ones, right? And that's just one gazillionth of an example of just this quantum intelligence that exists in nature. And so I imagine myself, if I was this off-planet warrior that was coming down into this really difficult, but potentially really decadently joyous reality to experience Earth, that I would look to the Earth for the answers, that I would look to the magic here to try and understand how to navigate this all. And listening to you speak about what you've come to embody and realize through your remote sessions, I feel really speaks to that. Why are we so intent in avoiding ourselves and in avoiding being in our bodies right here and now? Why do we need to separate ourselves from the majesty of the natural world? Why can't our birth and our death be as congruent with the world that we live in? Why does it need to have a separate story? So I really love that. And many aspects that, I would love to explore further and think on further. But I do have one more question for you, Paul. And you've answered it in and out of your other tidbits of conversation. But clearly something's happening on the earth. It just feels like the chaos is increasing, the prophecies around this time. there seems to be a lot of changes happening on the planet. Whether these are part of a natural cycle, whether they're part of an unnatural cycle is up for question. But I would love to know how you feel about these times. And the reason why I really wanted to hear from you is because you are connected to the earth. You are close to her and her magic and her beings. How is the earth feeling to you at this time?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. That's a big question, isn't it? I've thought about this, and I can't speak for nature. I can't speak for nature. And when I have tried again to push my antennae, my psychic ability to get to those places to answer more these like really juicy questions, it's that veil that's made me think, well, actually, we're not meant to be able to answer everything. So, but from my experience from it, what I sense is this. Mother Earth says to me, Paul, we, the collective on Earth, have done this many times with humans and without humans. So we're going to just do what we're going to do anyway, whether you guys are here or not.
Mm.
There's a wee complication, which is us humans are so blimmin' disconnected from us, being Earth, and the creatures, that they're creating waves and vibrations and ripples out through the web that isn't helping. It's not helping. Us humans aren't helping. And so because we've got right into this grandeur that, and with respect, some of your listeners, maybe yourself, feels the same thing, that they are from other places and other galaxies and other dimensions to help the planet Earth to transist into this higher dimension. And I just say, get off that pedestal. Take ourselves off the pedestal, sort our own stuff out. That's what Mother Nature's saying. If Mother Nature's here to help, if we're here to help, it's sort ourselves out, reconnect with the web again. And so all of this mess, all of this information, there's a lot going on. All sorts of information on physical reality through social media. We don't know what's real. And even our spirituality is up for, is it real? What is real? That's what we've just spoken about. What is real? I do think the Abrahamic religions have got a lot to answer for, because it's from there that the bridge out from nature started. I think we need to, I think, as Mother Earth said to me, Paul, we've done this many times before. We know what's coming, with you or without you humans. So my take on it, it's us humans need to sort our stuff out and get into healing. So how can it help? How can it do that? Taking flower essences, connecting to the seasons, giving gratitude, looking after the ancestors, light a fire and give gratitude, back to the earth. But raised a Catholic, Christianity, love, 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 love. Pours all over the place. Love, 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 love. And you can see it. And it's almost easier to access it through that doctrine of connecting to that love through Jesus. And so then where's the love in nature? Where's the love? How? And then it's so damn obvious. She provides all our clothes, all our food, roof over our head, our water, our medicine. We don't think that's not love. Our parents do that for us, and we know that that's a benchmark of their love. So this planet is filled with all of this love, and all. So, from my experience, planet Earth, she's going to do what she's going to do. It's us humans that really need to sort ourselves out and our relationship with Earth. It's not get into a rocket and find another planet for us to inhabit and leave this desolate place behind because we couldn't sort our stuff out. And so, and to take that even further, we're using this technology now, but we've created a whole artificial web on an organic web. What's that doing? What's that doing to the vibrations and frequencies and energies of Mother Nature herself? We've so disconnected. We've created an artificial web. I respect that we are using it now to communicate. So where we're at right now is us humans need to drop the I and get into the we. And I'm not into globalization, but we do need to understand that we're sitting on a web of life that it affects us, and we are affecting it by our negativity, by our consumption, by our blah blah blah, all of these things. So I can't speak for nature, but she's going to do the changes that we're perceiving with us or without us. I hope that's answered that. I don't know if I've spiraled out into other things.
No, not at all. And yeah, I feel that whatever she is doing right now, there is opportunity, there is an acceleration of consciousness. It's an opportunity should we choose to come into balance. I have this feeling about this time, and my own question that's been hanging in the air, that's been sitting there on the wall of our whole discussion, which is what is the role between us and the elemental beings? Like the fae and the elven, the dragons, beings that I've had much contact with that defy reality. What is our relationship with these beings? And when you talk of the web of life, the answer is so simple. It's so obvious. We're all part of the same web. And if I had a toe that was diseased, right? And I didn't try and support that toe to come back into balance, the entire body would suffer. And since we are part of the web, I feel like there is the answer. There is, whether these beings are part of our ancestral lineage or not, which is something that I'm always trying to feel into, in understanding this relationship. Does the question even need to be that difficult? Because we are all part of the same web. And when one part of that web is diseased and out of balance, it affects the whole web. And the reason why I think that it could be an opportune time is when one looks at chaos, chaos in nature is, in my experience, always seems to precedent a birthing. Birth always seems to be surrounded by chaos. And when I look at the state of the planet and the level of chaos now, it feels to me that there is something that is trying to birth. And then I think of all the other levels of consciousness on the planet, from the animals to those that are behind the veil. And I would imagine that the whole web and the health of the whole web is affected in its ability to take part of that rebirth, to experience or receive the fullness of the rebirth. And if there is indeed changes that are not written in stone, and changes that depend on the frequency or the cohesiveness of life on planet to reach a certain maxim or reach a certain opportunity, the whole health of the web is going to determine what potential is reached. And that really just speaks to the role of all of us on this web.
Yeah, right on, absolutely. And our role and our position, our responsibility, and what we're doing. And, how much negativity are we talking? How much negativity do we read? How much negativity and hate and spin in all of that stuff do we twang on the web? And you mentioned just a moment ago this sort of accelerated aspect of information that's coming through. Maybe not. Maybe, again, that's just us humans being able to almost listen, get on board, otherwise you might miss it. That actually, when we key into that information, it's been here already. The trees and the birds and the trees have been communicating with all that already. It's nothing new. It's almost like we're trying to remember again, isn't it? This vastly disconnected human being from its own mother and father. From from the earth and the stars and the moon and the sun, all these different aspects. And I think the more we can get back to those, whatever levers get us more closer to nature. And that can be just by looking at some flowers and just sending some appreciation, because for sure she needs to hear our appreciation. She needs to hear us giving thanks for the food in our bellies and the roof over our head and the clothes on our backs. And how much appreciation do we give? There's such a sense of programming of lack. You need a bigger house, a bigger car, a better holiday, bigger, bigger, better, retirement. It's all out of the present moment. And I think that our roles on the web and our roles with nature, I think it goes back to those classical teachings, just to be. Just be.
Mm.
We don't have to
Mm.
make it so complicated. And
Mm.
and thank you for pointing out earlier about the experiencing side of things before reading it, because that's very much the Druid side of things too. The Philip Cargon, the old Druid chief of the order that I was with, he used to say you could learn more about Druidry from sitting by a waterfall than you can by a book. And so to
Mm.
experience, to go out into nature. And again, this is why Sparrowbridge is so good, because it provides you that space where you can expand into your sixth sense. It's an amalgamation of all of our senses. And to go out
Mm.
and to feel the tree. There's a lot of prayer that gets us out and away into some other place.
Mm.
There is, but the aspect of being here in the present moment, and even in some Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism, it's about going in. Well, all of these are
Mm.
relevant, but what about going out into my sensual body and touching trees and plants and water and experiencing? That's when I think the ultimate bridges, the ultimate gasp of relief from Mother Nature, if I may say. It's like, yeah, you humans are now sitting on the web with ease and not all of this projection of what you want and where you're going and making gods in our image. Sorry, there's a bit of a thing with me about that.
Yeah. Paul, thank you so much
Yeah.
so much to think about, and that's just such a beautiful reminder. And the word that kept coming up for me while you were talking now was capture. Just not allowing ourselves to be captured away from the present moment, because the
Nice.
more and more captured we become, the more distracted, the more disconnected we become. And just
Yeah.
the humility in going out into nature with our presence and our gratitude. And I think that takes us right back to, what we were saying at the beginning of our conversation. This is the state that opens up the magic. When we come grateful and humble, and I couldn't agree with you more
Yeah.
in the importance of walking a life in devotion and gratitude to the natural world. I mean, that's how she's opened up to me, is just through constant little gifts and offerings and just spending time with her. And the more that one humbles to do that, the more that she starts to share. So beautiful, beautiful reminder for that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And it keys us into the magic. And there is
Mm.
magic. It is magic. The fairies exist and magic works. Look at remote healing. It blimming works, right? Magic, look at manifestation. It blimming works. So
Yeah.
we are manifestors. We really need to take responsibility of our magic, because we are spelling spells, throwing out spells all the time through our negativity and our disconnection and all these things. And I could feel it palpably. You're right. Just all we need to do is go out and connect with nature in ways like, for me, it's autumn. For you now, it's spring for us. But every walk I go out now is right. What do I notice about the spirit of spring? Oh, there's that yellow flower. Oh, wow, there's that. And I think it's so simple that we've made it so complicated through our religious garb that actually it is much more simple going out into nature, as you say, walking, appreciating, giving gratitude for the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the earth beneath our feet. She gives us so much. She loves us so much. She's provided even
Mm.
all these medicines through our flowers and plants. It's extraordinary that we're even having this conversation about it
Mm.
in ways.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Our
Yeah.
great mother, just the infinite provider. And when one really feels into just the infinity of light and presence, we never question when we open our mouths if we're going to be able to, if there's going to be enough air. And
Yeah. Yeah.
who grows
Yeah.
anyone who grows anything, you know that for one flower or one little pepper or one tomato, there's 100 more seeds that will produce 1,000 more plots. It's just never ending, the abundance that sprouts from her.
Well, just before we go though, we've got to say something for the masculine as well,
Please,
because
please.
the masculine is so misunderstood. I can hear your viewers and maybe society, but look what the masculine has done. I get it. Look what the paternal aspects have done. I get it. But I would encourage any one of your listeners or people viewing us is to explore the male aspects of nature. For me, it comes through as the green man, or in South Africa when we were working it was grandfather tree. But this toxic masculinity words, it hurts, that stuff, and I get it and I understand it, but for people who don't know, there is a loving and a nurturing and a healing and a protecting and a beautiful part of the masculine. It's not all of the experiences that we've had, but it can be found in nature, and nature has this male aspect to it in whichever way it gets dressed up, in whichever way you call it. But there is this almost this duality aspect of male and female, light and dark. It is one snapshot, like the yin yang is. You've got the black and the white, and the two fish represents the light and the dark, the male and female. But we forget that it's in a circle, which is it's one. So we mustn't forget the masculine is as a part as the whole as the feminine. I'm just try and bring that wholeness of because the masculine energy can be psychic, can be nurturing, can be intuitive. The feminine energy can be warrior, it can be practical, it can be logic. And I think if we can start to heal the whole, but almost stop doing this male-female thing, and to bring it that these qualities that we are saying just female, just male, are in us both, male and female. And to bring these two together, maybe also part and parcel of this repairing of our dis-ease on the web, that women are like that and men are like that, and women do that and men do that. I think we've got to start changing that rhetoric, that intuitive, nurturing, loving, beautiful, caring, protective can come from male as much as female, as much as female, as much as male. I know I'm biased because I'm a fella, but just putting that penny's worth in there too.
This is something that needs a whole new episode because it's something that I think about daily. And I think the key word is balance. There is balance in everything. And I mean, just the other day, I was moved to tears in a healing with a client. I was working on her inner masculine and inner feminine energies. And the being that was supporting me with the masculine energy showed me, or it allowed me to experience the beauty of the healed masculine. The masculine aspect of that warm sun, the dependability of the sun that rises every morning, and the life-giving, warming attributes of it. And it moved me to tears. It was so exquisite to feel into how beautiful the healed masculine is. And of course, there's toxicity within the feminine as well. The way I see it is that they are tuning forks. And when the feminine's out of balance, the masculine's out of balance, they don't exist without each other, as you said, in a circle. And this is actually something, we're running out of time now, but I would really love to explore at a later stage, because as someone whose work is, a lot in helping men and women reclaim that inner voice and find that inner sentience, and learning to be unafraid of the dark and unafraid of listening to that inner knowing, and giving up the toxic codependence on always being told what to do and the outer world. I have obviously immersed myself in reclaiming the feminine within me. And yet, when I look to nature, I know that the green man is there. I know that the healthy masculine is there. And trying to reconcile that all with all the deception that's come in on the masculine and the feminine in this day and age, is something that I feel is a really worthy topic, because there are many aspects of what you've just shared that I deeply believe and resonate with you. There has to be balance. There has to be balance. And
Mm,
I also believe that this over identification with polarity or not polarity, but duality is a trap. And
mm,
every time I connect in,
mm.
with the mother consciousness, that's what she shows me. She shows me that the yin and yang is part of the whole, that I mustn't be so judgmental in my view of the world. So, I
Yeah.
really wholeheartedly agree with that, Paul. Thank you.
And just on a note on that, men and women have misused their power. It's not just men who misuse; it's the men and women. But I think we're onto something where that whole, we've got to see all of these aspects. We don't have to see, but kind of got to see all these aspects within the whole, masculine and feminine. And surely, as I feel into this now, there's dis-ease right there, right? Not at
Mm,
ease, humanities. And again, we're sitting on this web. So
mm,
another discussion.
mm. For sure. Something that we will definitely revert back to, Paul. And yes, I just want to finish off in saying, the key here is accountability. Um, how can any one gender not take accountability? I mean, that's ludicrous. That's a
That's
very
it.
immature masculine or immature feminine to believe that blame sits on either side. We are part of the
Yeah,
same whole.
yeah,
And for those that
yeah.
believe in reincarnation, I mean, something that I say often is that be careful of the finger pointing to, the men that burned the witches, because you might have been one of those men in a previous lifetime. If you believe in reincarnation, we don't just reincarnate in one sex. So, the whole story is quite flawed, but there certainly is dis-ease in the harmony between the masculine and the feminine at the moment. And something that I would love to explore deeper, because I do believe that there are missing voices. I really do believe there are missing voices for the green man, for the uh, whole and
Grandfather
healed
tree.
masculine, and a grandfather tree. Yeah, and it's something that I would dearly love to explore further with you. But thank you for your time,
Yeah,
Paul, today. It's been so
my
enriching and
pleasure.
so positive. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and everyone for listening to our conversation today. Thank you all.